What's up? I'm Vin, and today I'm going through the STAAR Algebra 1 test from May 2021, and I'll leave a link to a copy of this test in the description below. So let's get started. So first up here, we're going to simplify the square root of 184, and to do this, we need to think of perfect square factors of 184, and the perfect squares are 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, and so on like this. But I'll try out 4 here. If we do 184 divided by 4, we could use a calculator for this, or we could do this by hand, and this is going to go in 46 times. So this breaks down to the square root of 4 times the square root of 46. And now 4 is a perfect square, so the square root of 4 is 2, and we have 2 times the square root of 46, and this is as simplified as it gets. Now if we want to check our answer here, we could just type in the square root of 184, and we press enter, and then we could write our answer in 2 times the square root is second x squared, and then we write our 46, press enter, and notice we have matching decimals, so our answer is definitely good. Question 2, we have a graph here, and we want to know which function is best represented by the graph. So for this one here, this formula is really good to know, y equals mx plus b, where m is your slope, which is your rise over run, and b is your y-intercept. And when I say rise over run, that's your rate of change, and that tells you how fast the line is going up or down. So right away I notice this line is dropping, so our slope is going to be negative, which allows us to eliminate these 2 answer choices right away. And then if I want to find each component, notice our y-intercept is at the point 0, 4. So we have a b value of 4 if we're going to use this formula, and then our slope, we're going to calculate the rise over the run. So I'm going to go from the point 0, 4, and then let's say I pick a nice point like this, like the point 3, 2. And then our slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now look, you could just count the rise over run and saying you're going to drop down, you're going down 2. So we're rising -2, and then we're running 1, 2, 3. So you could just use this and say your equation is y equals -2/3 x plus 4 after you plug into this equation here, and that would give us option J here. Otherwise, let's say you're bad at counting like this, like I don't know, you're just nervous that you're going to miscount or something. You could always find the slope by calling this, let's say, we call that x1, y1, and we call this one x2, y2. And then if we use the formula, we would have y2 is 2 minus y1 is 4 divided by x2 is 3 minus x1 is 0. And that would give us -2/3 as well. So question 3, we have a table that represents a linear relationship. We want to know what is the rate of change, which is another way of saying slope, and the rate of change of y with respect to x. So here, remember the formula from just before, this is the formula for slope. And what we know about a line is that the slope of a line does not change. The rate of change is constant. Whether or not the line is going up or if the line is going down, the slope of the line doesn't change, which means we could pick any 2 points to find the slope between. So looking at this here, I'm looking, and strategically I would prefer to pick these 2 points. The reason being that the change in x is, notice it's going from -6.5 to -2.5. So that means my change in x will be a whole number that it's going to go forward for. And I just do this because I would rather not deal with too many decimals when we actually have to simplify. So now we have m equals, and notice here, if I were to write this out, the first point we're using is -6.5 comma -72, and then the next point we're using is -2.5 comma -32. And this could act as our x1, y1, and this point could act as our x2, y2. So now we just plug into the formula here. We're going to have -32 minus -72 divided by x2 is -2.5, and we're subtracting -6.5. If you could just do this math in your head, like you see here, that you're going forward 40 units and you're going forward in the x direction 4 units, and then 40 over 4 is 10, that's great. Otherwise, just do this work here. And now when you subtract the negative, the operation will change to addition, and that's going to give us a 40 on top, and on bottom we have minus going to plus, and then 6.5 minus 2.5 is 4, and 40 divided by 4 is 10. So this is going to match up with choice A. Question 4, we have this quadratic. We want to know which statement is true. Now, since ultimately we have to find the zeros of this thing, what we could do is just graph this x squared minus 6x. Remember, the x is the variable button over here, and then we have minus 16. And I'm just going to press graph here, and notice that our roots are the points where the graph hits the x-axis, and this is happening at -2 and 8. So just doing this tells me right away the answer is H. But if I wanted to show more work, remember, when you're trying to factor something like x squared minus 6x minus 16, you're looking for two numbers that have a sum of -6 and a product of -16. And when we think about it here, looking at choice H, you could see here that if I factor this to x plus 2 times x minus 8, those two numbers fit the description because 2 plus -8 is -6 and 2 times -8 is -16. And then if I actually want to find the roots, I set each factor individually equal to 0 like this. And what we have here is if I subtract 2 on both sides, I get a root of x equals -2. And if I add 8 to this equation, I'm going to get x equals +8. So our roots are definitely -2 and 8. So this choice is looking good. So question 5, we want to know which ordered pair is in the solution set of this linear inequality here. Now we could just plug in all 4 points into this inequality and find the answer that way. But a nicer way to do this would be to actually show the work. And what we want to do is we want to solve this inequality for y. So we could start by doing -8x on both sides. And what we have here is now we have 16y is greater than -8x plus 32. And to isolate y, we're going to divide everything by 16. So when we get here, we're going to have y is greater than, this works out to -1/2 x, and then plus 2 like this. So then what we could do is we could find here, this is our slope, and this is our y-intercept. We could go ahead and graph this inequality. So we're starting at 0, 2. That's our y-intercept. And we're going down 1, our rise over run, we're going down 1 and to the right 2 like this. And I'm putting open circles here because this is strictly greater than. So our line is going to be a dotted line and we're going to shade above. So I'm going down 1 over 2 like this. And for multiple choice, we don't actually have to show all this work. But once again, I'm going to pretend this would show up as a free response question where we actually have to do the question this way. So I'm going to go ahead and put our dotted line here and we're shading above like this. So now we could just go through the answer choices and see which one fits the description. So if we look at the first answer choice, 0, 2 is on the line, but this is a dotted line. So this does not count because it's on the line and the line is dotted. If it was greater than or equal to, then A would be an answer, but it's just greater than. So this is not an answer. -3, 5 is looking good because notice this is in the shaded region. So right away I could see this is our answer. -1, 1 falls outside, so this is no good. And then 4, 0 is on the line, which is a problem because this is a dotted line. But if we really wanted to be safe here, we could plug in x equals -3 and y equals 5 to the original inequality, and we would have 8 times x plus 16 times y is greater than 32. And this is -24 plus 80 is greater than 32. And if we add those, we're going to get 56 after combining these is greater than 32, which is definitely true. So choice B is our answer. So question 6, we want to know the equation in slope-intercept form that passes through these 2 points. So what we need is the formula for slope, which is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And we also need the formula for the equation of a line, which we have is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. We could also use mx plus b, but I prefer to use this formula. So then what we're going to find first is our slope m, and we could do that by labeling this point as, let's say, x1, y1, and the second point we could call x2, y2. So our slope is going to be 34 minus -11, and we're dividing by 39 minus, we have -26. So now the operation is going to change to addition since we have 2 negatives here, and then 34 plus 11 is going to work out to 45 over. We're also going to have this changing to addition on bottom, and that's going to work out to 65. And now these can reduce. Divide the top and bottom by 5. And after we do this, 45 over 5 is 9. 65 over 5 is 13. So this is our slope. So right away, I can see our slope is going to be 9 over 13. And right away, that means we could cross out choice F and choice G. So now we're ready to write the equation of our line. We're just going to plug into this formula here. And I could use any one of these points to write the equation out, but why not use the, we'll use the first point here, x1, y1. So we have y minus, y1 is -11. So if I do y minus -11, that's going to change to y plus 11. Equals the slope m we just found is 9 over 13. And we're multiplying by x minus x1. So just remember, when you plug in, these are going to change signs here. If I do minus 26, that's going to become a plus 26. And now I just distribute here. I'm solving for y. We have 9 over 13 times x plus, and I'll do that off to the side here. If I do 9 over 13 times 26, I could just use a calculator for this, or I could just say 26 over 13 is 2, and then 9 times 2 is 18, like that. So I have 9/13 x plus 18, and we have y plus 11. So then to solve for y, just go minus 11 on both sides. And now you've got y equals 9/13x plus 7, which is going to match choice H. Question 7, we want to find a graph that has these two characteristics. So the first condition is that the axis of symmetry of the graph is at x equals -3. So looking at choice A, if we draw a vertical line through x equals -3 like this, notice that does cut the quadratic in half. So A is a contender, but if we draw a vertical line through x equals -3 for this graph, notice this is not chopping the quadratic in half. The line would have to be at x equals 3, so this one is out. And then if we look here at x equals -3, we have an axis of symmetry. So B is a contender, and then choice D is no good, because if we draw the axis of symmetry at x equals -3, it is not chopping that graph in half. So that's the first condition taken care of. But next what we want to look at is what we want our function P to have exactly 1, 0, which means one root, or we need to have one location where the graph touches the x-axis. And notice here that in choice A, the graph touches the x-axis only once at the point -3, 0, whereas in choice B here, notice there are two roots at -6, 0 and at 0, 0. So this one would not have exactly 1, 0, it has two zeros. So that means we're going to chop this out, and A is definitely our answer. Question 8 is law of exponents. It really helps to know this. A times B to the C power is the same thing as A to the C times B to the C. And then also what you want to know here is that when you have a power raised to another power like this, this is the same thing as A to the B times C. So we could combine these two rules here to answer this question. So what I would do first here, and I'm just boxing this off, is I would expand this as x to the 9 raised to the 5th, and then we have y raised to the 5th, and then we have z to the 4th also raised to the 5th. So I'm just using that first rule. And now for the second rule, I can multiply these two numbers because I have a power to a power. So I have x to the 9 times 5 is 45. Y to the 5th, I'm just going to leave alone because there's no extra power. And then z to the 4 to the 5th, I would do 4 times 5 is 20. So I have z to the 20th power here. And this looks like it's matching up with choice J. Question 9, we have a graph of the function g, and it's passing through these 2 points, and we want to know what is the slope and y-intercept. So I would start with the y-intercept. So if we look at the graph here, the y-intercept is clearly at the point 0, 1. That's where the line crosses the y-axis. So the y-intercept is 1, which means we could eliminate choice A and we could eliminate choice C. And now the next thing we want to find here is what is the slope of this line. So we could find the slope between any 2 points we want. So we could find the slope between the 2 points they gave us in the beginning, which I highlighted in blue here. We could say the slope is, and we would have 6 minus -4 divided by, we would have 7 minus -7 here. And this would work out to 10 over 14. And when you divide the top and bottom by 2, you're going to get 5 over 7. But you could also use 0, 1 as your other point here. If you wanted to find the slope between, let's say, these two, you would get the same answer. So notice here, if I did 6 minus 1, divided by 7 minus 0, this also gives me a slope of 5 over 7. But either way, that's going to give us choice B. All right, question 10. If you can't do the algebra, this trick should totally be illegal. But if you're allowed this calculator, press math. You go up to option C here, numeric solver. And on the left side here, well, the left side of the equation will be E1. So we could type in our equation. They won't mind in the calculator if we put an x instead. So we have 4 times, I'll put x minus 3. And then we're going to tack on our plus 19. And then the right side of the equation, I'm going to put in the equation 2 spot. We have 8 times, I'm going to put 2x plus 3, and then close that parenthesis and write plus 7 on the outside. Now for this part here, after we press OK, we have to kind of guess an answer. So let's say I claim, all right, x equals 1. And I'm going to say my bound is basically what 2 numbers is my answer between. So our smallest answer choice was -2 and our highest answer choice was +2. So I'm just going to say, let's say from -3 to 3, because we just have to put a bound here that would capture all of the possible answers. So we just close this part out, press delete, and then when I scroll up, notice it gives me the option to solve, and I'm going to press the graph button, not enter. And that's going to solve this, and this tells us our solution is -2. So without doing much work here, we can see this is choice H. But if this test is testing you on algebra, I'm not going to show you how to do all the algebra questions with no algebra. So we'll actually solve this out. So we'd have 4 times y, and then we distribute the 4 to the -3. We're going to have -12 here. And then be careful, don't do 4 times 19 because that's not inside the parentheses. Just tack on the plus 19. And this is equal to, we have 8 times 2y is 16y, and then we have 8 times 3 is 24. And we're tacking on a plus 7 at the end because that's just outside the parentheses. Now here I would combine like terms. -12 plus 9 is going to give you 7, and we have 4y still. And then on the right side of the equal sign, we have 16y, and then 24 plus 7 is 31. So then here I would just combine like terms. So we're going to go -4y on both sides. And I always move over the term that's going to keep everything positive. Like you could do -16y, but I try to stick with positive numbers as much as I can. So this is going to cancel, and now we have 7 equals 16 minus 4 is 12. We tack on the y plus 31, and now we subtract 31. And after we subtract here, see, we still got a negative, so there was no avoiding that in this case. -24 equals 12y, and now I'll just write the rest of this over here. We have -24 equals 12y, so just divide both sides by 12. To get y alone, and -24 over 12 is also -2. So our answer is definitely -2. Question 11, we have this graph here. We want to know, based on this information, which function best models this graph. And if you know your stuff about exponential functions, anytime you see an exponential function that's dropping like this has to do with our base being between 0 and 1. So right away I could see without using the calculator that this is going to be choice B because 0.6 is between 0 and 1. Notice the base here, 25.5, is a big number. That's greater than 1. And if I raise 25.5 to some power, that's going to be exponential growth going up like this. Same thing with choice C here. We have a base of 25.5, which is greater than 1. So this would look like this would look like this, and then also 6.12 is smaller than 25.5, but it's still greater than 1. So choice D would look something like this. So I'm confident in choice B. But let's say I want to be really certain here. I'm going to go to y equals. I'm going to clear out what we had before, and I'm going to write 25.5, and I'm going to write our function 0.6. And we're going to the x power. So I press this up arrow here and I type in the x. And now when I press graph, I'm not able to see everything. And that's because at x equals 0, our graph started at 25.5. So here I'd actually go to the window. And you can adjust this to match the picture. Our maximum y value on this graph, it started at 0, 25.5. So I would just change this to, let's say, 30 so that it captures everything. And now when we press graph, we get a much better picture of what's going on. So at first glance here, our answer is looking really good when we compare it to the actual question. But if I want to be 100% certain, I press second graph. And notice 0, we get 25.5. At x equals 1, we have 15.3. And when x equals 2, we have 9.18. So our answer is definitely checking out. So question 12, we have a ball was in a machine and was thrown up in the air. And the table represents some points on the graph of a function that models the ball's distance from the ground with respect to time. So one thing to point out here is that they're saying, what is the range for this situation? The domain always refers to the independent variable, which in this case is the time since the ball was thrown from the machine. And then the distance from the ground represents the range. This is acting almost like the x and y values here. So then what we want to think about, the range is all the possible y values that's going on here. So if we look through the answer choices, all real numbers less than or equal to 7.66. This one we have to be careful with. This is a tempting answer, but the danger here, I could think of a real number like, let's say, -100. That number is definitely less than or equal to 7.66. But the problem with this is that the ball is not going to go 100 meters into the earth. When we think about what's going on here, is like the ball is going up and then it's coming back down. But something like -100 would mean when we throw the ball in the air, it goes through the earth and just keeps traveling to the center of the earth, which is just kind of ridiculous. So that's definitely not our answer. So all real numbers less than or equal to 1.25. This is kind of confusing things with the domain, mixing up the domain and range. So this is out. But here we go. All real numbers greater than or equal to 0 and less than or equal to 7.66. This is the one because remember, the ball is above ground. The ball is not going through the earth. So that's why this choice kind of fixes the problem we ran into with the first answer choice. And then we have all real numbers greater than or equal to 0 and less than or equal to 1.25. This is once again mixing up domain with range. So this choice is out. So the third option here is the best. Question 13, which graph best represents the solution set to this system? So we have to solve each of these for y. So the first inequality here, x plus y is less than 1. I would just go minus x on both sides like this. And that's going to give us y is less than negative x plus 1. So when I'm imagining negative x plus 1, I'm just imagining here we have a slope of negative 1 and a y-intercept of positive 1. So this would start off somewhere like this. It would be at the point 0, 1, and it's going down 1 over 1 like this, and it's dropping. So the first part of this is going to be a dotted line, and we're shading under that line like this. So we have a dotted line that's going like this, and we're going under. So A is still in the mix, because you see how we have, this is the x plus y is less than 1 inequality here. When we look at choice C, this one we could chop out, because you see how this is solid. This line dropping here is solid, so we could cross this out. This one is still in the mix. However, less than the line, y is less than negative x plus 1 means we're shading down. So that means we could cross off choice B here, because this is shading above the line like this. And then same thing with choice D. The problem here is that the line negative x plus 1 should be a dotted line. So this is out. So without even checking the second inequality, I know it's going to be choice A. But if I really want to be 100% safe here, I'll take the time to solve this for y as well. So here, there's a few ways we could do this, but we could subtract negative x, or we could go minus x on both sides like this. And then we have minus y is less than or equal to negative x plus 2. And then if I want to get rid of that negative, I could divide both sides by negative 1. But remember, when you divide an inequality by a negative, the sign flips. So we have y is greater than or equal to, and if you divide each thing by negative 1, you're going to have positive x, and you're going to have minus 2 like this. So this, if I graph this on the same line, I'm going down 2, and our slope is positive 1, so that's going to send me about here. And the line is going up, and we're shading above this line. So the common solution between the two of them is going to be this space over here, which is definitely matching choice A. So question 14 is a free response question. We don't have a multiple choice to choose from. So here we just want to find the value of P of 7. So this, you can do this without a calculator by just going negative 4 times, and now we replace the x with 7. We have minus 15 after, squared plus 2. And this is going to give us, we have negative 4, 7 minus 15 is negative 8, and this is being squared, plus 2. And remember order of operations. We have, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, otherwise she will ruin your day. So parentheses exponents first. We do negative 8 squared is positive 64, because that's negative 8 times negative 8. And then if I do positive 64 times the negative 4 in front, this is going to give me, let's just see, I would just do times 2 if I was doing this in my head, and that would be negative 256. So I would have negative 256, and then I'm just adding 2 at the end. So this would work out to negative 254. But if you get to bring a calculator to the test, there's no shame in going like this. We have negative 4 times, we have parentheses, x minus 15, close it and square it, and then we're tacking on a plus 2. And if you want to know what's going on at 7, press second graph, you go to the table, and you scroll down to 7 here, and notice that the actual function value here is negative 254. So that checks out with the answer we had done by hand. So question 15, we have a whole lot going on here. We have a customer paid a total of $6 for 68 copies at a print shop, and some copies were black and white and the rest were color copies. So the black and white cost 8 cents, color copies cost 15 cents. And we have which system of equations can be used to find B, the number of black and white copies, and C, the number of color copies. Well, one thing to be mindful of is that if their variable is B for black and white, then 0.08 times B tells you how much money you paid for black copies, plus 0.15 times C is telling you how much you paid for color copies, but how much you paid in total was $6. So this is what we're setting equal to $6. But then remember, we made a total of 68 copies. So that's going to be B plus C. The number of black and white plus the number of colored copies in total is going to be equal to 68. And now we just scan the answer choices. I know it's not this one. B plus C equals 6 is them mixing up the price with the number of copies. B plus C equals 68. All right, this one's looking good, but the prices are mixed up. This is 0.15 times B, but it's 8 cents for black and white. So this is saying it's 15 cents for black and white, so that's out. Now B plus C is 6 is also mixing up number of copies with how much it'll cost. And this has to be the answer, but let's double check. B plus C is 68. And we have 8 cents times B plus 15 cents times C equals 6. Definitely our answer. Question 16, we have a graph of a quadratic. We want to know which function best represents the graph. So we could use a calculator, just type in every answer choice and see which one matches this. Or if we want to be more slick here, we could say this is the point 0.8. That's the y-intercept. And that means that the function at 0 has to equal 8. So when I look at these, I plug in 0 to all of them. And choice F is gone because when we plug in 0, that's going to wipe this out and leave us with just 16, which is too much. We need it to be equal to 8. And then the second choice, f of 0, is also 16. So this choice is out. Now we've narrowed it down to 2 choices, but if we want the final answer, we could look at the roots here. We have roots at x equals -4, we have a y value of 0, and at x equals +4, we have a y value of 0. So these are our roots. So when we look here, this you could probably just do in your head, but if you plug x equals 4 into these answer choices, which one's going to give you 0? And it's definitely going to be this one. Because if we look, f of 4 would be equal to -1/2 times 4 squared plus 8. And then this works out to 16. So if I do -1/2 times 16, that's -8 plus 8, which is equal to 0. However, if we plug in 4 to choice J, we have -4 squared plus 8. And remember order of operations. If there's no parenthesis before your exponent term, think of this as -1 times 4 squared plus 8. And if I do 4 squared is 16 times -1, I have -16 plus 8 is -8. Okay, so that's why this choice is eliminated, and it's definitely choice H. But if we want to be 100% safe here, we could just write -1/2, and then we're multiplying that by x squared, and then tacking on the plus 8 here. And if we press graph, so I'm going to press zoom 6 because remember we had to scroll way up before. So zoom 6 puts the graph back to normal. But you can see this matches what we have in the question. So 17 is more slope. They really like slope on this test. So what we have, slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And we're using this formula because there's a linear relationship between x and y. So pick your 2 favorite points. Mine happen to be these 2. So then I'm going to say -2, 1. That's my x1, y1. And then 3, -7, that's my x2, y2. So our slope here, let's just clean that up a bit, is going to be -7 minus y1 is 1 over x2 is 3 minus x1 is -2. And this is -8 over 5, definitely choice A. So question 18, it's multiple choice. So if you don't know how to factor this by yourself, you could always just brute force distribute all the answer choices and see which one matches. So looking at this right away, if I did x times 2x in all of them, they're all going to give us 2x squared. So I would target the last term, 63. 9 times 7 is 63. I agree with that. -9 times -7. So these all have the same last term as well. So we really would have to expand all of these. So I think it really does help to know how to do this by hand because sometimes you could just eliminate everything away and get there. Otherwise, what I would do here is use the AC method, which means we have an A value of 2, a B value of -25, and we have a C value of 63. But if we multiply 2 times 63, we're going to get 126. And then we have a B value of -25. So we need 2 numbers that have a sum of -25 and have a product of 126. So this you could always break down. We already said this is 2 times 63. But if I break this down more, that's 3 times 21, and that's 7 times 3. So now I start thinking about the factors here. Which one of these are going to be 25 when we combine them? And I'm starting to see here, it is looking like if we did 14 and 9 is not going to work. We need it to work out to -25. So maybe if we did, let's see, if we did 18 and 7, all right, these are going to be the ones. Now I did the prime factorization here. You could also use a calculator here and reverse engineer everything. But when I write the prime factorization out, like these are all the prime factors, I'm just kind of multiplying them out in different order in my head. And I see here, if I did 3 times 3 times 2, that's going to give us 18, and we're left with a 7. And that means 18 times 7 is going to be equal to 126, like this. So that tells me that my 2 numbers are 18 and 7, But there's a catch here. They're both going to be negative because negative 18 plus negative 7 is negative 25. And then if I multiply those, I get 126. All right, so this would be like kind of like a no calculator approach, but this is kind of cruel numbers to use because our times tables don't extend to the 18s. That's just not fair. So calculator is totally fair game here. So I'll show you how I'll use the calculator to get those after. But now what I would do is factor this by grouping. So I need the greatest common factor of these two, which would be 2x. And if I divide by 2x, I get x minus 18x over 2x is 9. And then I would factor out a minus 7. And when I divide each thing by minus 7, I'm also going to have x minus 9. And then from here, what I would do with this, I'm going to take out a common x minus 9. And I would have 2x minus 7 left. So this is factoring by grouping, and it gets us choice G. Just remember, we could distribute everything. Okay, question 19. So we have, what is the equation in standard form of the line that passes through this point and is parallel to the line represented by this? So just know that parallel lines have the same slope. Okay, so that's something we're going to use here. And you can just imagine here, when I have two parallel lines that aren't going to cross, they have the same slope because they're going in the same direction. That's why they're not going to cross. So here, if we want to be parallel to this line, we have to find the slope of this line, and being in the form y equals mx plus b is what makes this possible for us. So here, I would take this and I would go minus 8x on both sides, and then that would give us 3y equals negative 8x plus 15. So then to solve for y, I would divide everything by 3, and then I'd have y equals, and I'll separate this as negative 8 over 3 times x plus 15 over 3 is 5. So our slope is going to be equal to this line. So we're just taking the slope here, which is negative 8/3. Remember, once you solve for y, the slope is the number in front of the x. So then what we're doing here is we're writing the equation of a line that has this slope going through this point x1, y1. So then from here, there's a few ways we could do this, but I'm just going to use this formula from before. We could use the reference sheet here, but this formula is just one that I use through all levels of math. So we'd have y minus 1 is y plus 1 equals the slope, negative 8/3, and we have x minus 6. So then our goal is to make this look like the previous page here. And notice there's no fractions going on. So what I would do here is I would multiply everything by 3 to get rid of this. So if I multiply it by 3, I'm going to have 3y plus 3 after we multiply this. But then when I do 3 times negative 8/3, 3 times negative 8/3. So when I have this, I don't know why I'm writing that in parentheses. We just have 3 times negative 8/3. That wasn't necessary. The 3 over 3 cancels and we're left with just minus 8. So this is equal to minus 8 times x minus 6. And then from here, we want the y terms and the x terms on one side, and we want the constants on the other. So we distribute, we got negative 8x plus 48, and we have 3y plus 3. So then what I would do is I would add 8x to both sides. So plus 8x on both sides and go minus 3 on both sides. And then there we have it. We're going to have 8x plus 3y equals 48 minus 3 is going to leave us with 45. So we scan here, and this is going to work out to choice C. Question 20 here, we have a graph of this linear function h shown on the grid, and we have f of x is equal to x. And then we have h of x is a times f of x, where a is some constant, but we have to solve for the value of a. So for this, what I would do, since this is a graph of h of x, is I would try to come up with the equation of this line. And we could be pretty safe here to say that 0, 0 is on this line. But just in case that it's not, what we could do is find the slope between these 2 points and then write the equation of the line through any one of those points. So here, the slope of our line here, we could just do 8 minus negative 4. And then we're dividing by, we would have 10 minus negative 5 like this. And if we work this out, this is going to work out to 12 over 15. And dividing the top and bottom by 3 gives us 4/5. And then notice here, our slope is 4/5. So if we go up 4 over 5, notice that brings us to the point 0, 0. So I'm feeling pretty safe here to say that this line is going through the point 0, 0. So then the equation of h of x, if we want to write an equation for this, is we could just think of mx plus b. We have a slope here of 4/5. So we're going to have 4/5 x plus the y-intercept is going through, well, it's going through the y-axis at 0. So that tells us our y-intercept, our b value, is 0. So our function h of x is just 4/5 x. So then if we set these two equal to each other, we have h of x is 4/5 x. And this is going to be equal to a times f of x is equal to x. So setting these two equal to each other tells us after x cancels out on both sides that a is equal to 4/5. So this is our solution to this question here. So question 21, we have a conservation agency tracking sea turtles, and the data could be modeled using an exponential function here. So what we want to do is find which function best models the data. Now we could do this by just typing in all of these functions, or we could generate the function ourselves using the calculator. So what we're going to do is we're going to press stat here and go over to edit. And then what we're going to do is type the x values in the L1 column and the y values in the L2 column. So now that everything's typed in here, we're just going to press stat and go to the right over to calculate. And they told us that this could be modeled with an exponential function. So we're going to choose option 0 here, the exponential regression. And we just keep pressing enter like this, and this is going to give us the data we need. So now that we have this data here, we have A, which is 46797.94 if we round it. And right away, that's looking like it's matching up choice B here. And then our base of our exponent, our B value, is 0.93 if we round to the x power. So n of x here could be modeled by this function. Definitely choice B. So question 22, we have a part of a linear function graph below, and we want to know which inequalities best describe the domain and the range of the part shown. Now, one thing to be mindful of here is that this is a solid line here, and also what we have is the endpoints are very clearly colored in. So this is going to be a situation here where we have a less than or equal to in our domain and range. So that means we could eliminate choice F, we could eliminate choice G because these are just strictly less than, and then H and J are the possible answers here. So when we're looking for the domain and range, what I kind of think of here is imagine you want to put walls and you want to put a floor and ceiling on top of this line here. So if I go ahead and put a ceiling on top of it, notice the ceiling goes up to 5 here. And the floor, if I were to put this line as low as possible so that it touches the lowest point on the graph, notice it goes all the way down here to -4. But then if I look at the walls, the wall on the left that encases this starts at -7 and it stops at +6. So remember, the domain is the x values here. So just looking at this, the domain is going to start at -7 and it's going to stop. It's going to be all the x values up until +6 like this, while the range is going to be all the possible y values. And we're going from a floor of -4 all the way up to a y value of +5 like this. So now we just scan the answer choices here, and this is looking like option J. So question 23, we could just plug in every x value here and see which one gives us 0, or we could just take this and divide everything by 3 and solve this by hand. So we would have x squared minus 10x minus, and 72 divided by 3 goes into 7 twice with a remainder of 1, and then 3 goes into 12 4 times like this, and this is equal to 0. So this will factor to x minus 12 times x plus 2, and we're setting this equal to 0 like this. And remember, this works because -12 plus 2 is -10, and the product of -12 and 2 is -24. And then to get from factors to roots, we just take the opposite. So we would have a root of x equals 12 and a root of x equals -2. So this is matching up with choice C. But remember, if we wanted to use the calculator for this, we could just plug -2 in for each x value here. And if we work this out, doing this by hand here, let's see what we get. We would have 3 times +4 after we do -2 squared is 4, and we have 3 times 4 is 12. Minus 30 times -2, well, we have -30 times -2 is +60. And then minus 72 is equal to 0. And this is going to work out to 72 minus 72 equals 0, which is definitely a true statement. So C is our answer. So question 24, we have two tables for lines f and g, and we want to know which system of equations represents lines f and g. So for this here, what we have is the equation y equals mx plus b, where m represents the slope of the line and b represents the y-intercept. So this is a popular theme on this test here. And to find the slope between, to find the slope of a line, you could pick any 2 points to find the slope between. So let's say we choose these two for line f. So right away, what I'm imagining for line f is our slope of line f, and I'll just put a f here. So we have the slope of f is going to be equal to, we do 10.5 minus 7. So we're taking the difference of the y values and dividing by the difference of the x values. And on top, we're going to have 3.5. On bottom, 4 minus 2 is 2. So the slope of line f, if you do 3.5 over 2, that's 1.75. So what I'm imagining before I do any work is I have y equals 1.75x plus blah, blah, blah. some number for the y-intercept here. But why that's helpful for us is that notice choices H and J could be eliminated because neither of those answer choices have a line that has a coefficient of 1.75 in front of the x. So that means it's between F and G. And then notice that for the last part though, for y equals negative 4x minus 8 versus y equals negative 4x minus 2, both of those lines for G have the same slope in the answer choices, but their y-intercepts are different. So for this, what I would do for something like this is just pick a random point, like let's say negative 2, 0, and I would plug it into both of those second equations here and see which one gives you something true. So let's say we take choice F, and we have an x value of negative 2 and a y value of 0. If we were to plug into this equation here, we would have 0 equals negative 4 times x is negative 2 and then minus 8. And if we work this out here, this is going to give us 8 minus 8, which is definitely 0. But just to be safe here, I'm going to show you why G is no good. If we were to plug into the equation for option G here, we would have a y equals or 0 equals negative 4 times x is negative 2, and then we tack on a minus 2, and this will tell you that 0 equals 8 minus 2. So 0 is equal to 6, which is not true. That's why choice G could be eliminated, and this is definitely our answer choice. So question 25, the graph of the linear function is shown on this grid, and what is the rate of change of y with respect to x? Well, they really do like finding slope. So what we have here is this is the point negative 4, 7. And then over here, this is the point 4, 1. So just find the slope between those 2 points. We got 1 minus 7. I'm doing this y minus this y over 4 minus negative 4 here. And then this works out to, we're going to have negative 6 on top. We're going to have 8 on bottom after the minus minus goes plus. And then divide the top and bottom by 2. And you're going to have negative 3/4, which is option D. So question 26 is algebra, and we need to know our order of operations here. Before we do any division here, we should take care of parentheses exponents first. So this, I would leave everything alone on top. But on bottom, notice we have parentheses exponents. So what we're going to do here, using the rule from earlier, we're going to take whatever's in parentheses and raise each term individually to the second power. So we'd have 3 to the second times x to the second times y to the second. And then this, if we simplify it a little bit, we're going to have 36x to the 4, y to the 5, divided by 3 squared is 9, and then we have x squared, y squared like this. So now the terms that belong together here, we should be thinking about putting these terms together. So we have the constants belong together, and then we have the x terms here. These belong together. And then the last terms that belong together here would be the y terms. So we want to think of those together. And the rule we're going to use is a to the b over a to the c is a to the b minus c, except when we do 36 divided by 9 is just 4. But then this is going to be x to the power 4 minus 2, and we're going to have y to the power 5 minus 2. So we're just using that law of exponents twice. So this will be 4x to the 4 minus 2 is 2, and we'll have y to the 5 minus 2 is 3. So we have 4x squared y cubed, and that's matching up with choice H. So question 27, what is the value of the y-intercept of this graph? And what I think about right away, when I hear y-intercept, I know that no matter what my graph looks like, the y-intercept, the x value is always equal to 0. So that tells us here to find the y-intercept, we're just going to plug in x equals 0 to the function. And we have 73 times 4/5 to the 0 power. And this you could type in a calculator or just know that 4/5 to the 0 power is equal to 1. And then 73 times 1 is going to be 73. So that's our solution. So question 28, we have a graph of f of x equals x squared, and we're going to reflect it over the x-axis, then stretch it horizontally. So what I'm imagining here is if we have a graph of x squared, which is smiling at us like this, and then we reflect it over the x-axis, that's going to send it through the x-axis, and it's going to be a graph that's now frowning at us like this. And then if we stretch it horizontally, what we're essentially doing is we're expanding it out, making it wider like this. Okay, so this I'm just kind of imagining in my head the actual progression. So choice F and choice H are automatically out because there was no actual reflection over the x-axis to flip this thing. And that's why those two choices are gone. And if we look here, choice G is no good because that would be if we stretched it vertically towards the y-axis. It would make the graph skinnier. Okay, but stretching it wide is making it go more flattened out here. So that's why we're going with the last option. Question 29, we just have to expand this here and just make sure that you distribute So we're going to have 3 over 2p times 1 over 2p. And when you do 3 over 2 times 1 over 2, just know when you multiply fractions, you multiply the top numbers. 3 times 1 is 3, 2 times 2 is 4. So this would be equal to 3 over 4. P times p is p squared. And then we're going to have 3 over 2p times 3. And when you multiply a fraction like 3 over 2 by 3, just multiply the numerator of this fraction by the whole number. So we would have 3 times 3 is 9 over 2 like this. So we would have plus 9 over 2 times p, because once again, we're doing 3 over 2p times 3. And then next up, we're going to distribute a 1, which is nice because anytime you multiply by 1, nothing happens. So we have 1 times 1/2 p would be 1/2 p. And then 1 times 3 is going to work out to just plus 3. So now we just simplify things a little bit. This is going to be 3 over 4 p squared plus, and when we add or combine like terms here, we're just adding the coefficients. So we have to do 9 over 2 plus 1 over 2. And remember, when you add fractions, you just add the numerators together, but you keep the denominator the same. Don't say 10 over 4. That would definitely throw the question off. And then 10 divided by 2 is 5. So we'd have plus 5p and then plus 3. So now scanning the answer choices, this is option C. So question 30, we want to know which inequality is best represented by this graph. And I would treat this like writing the equation of a line here. And notice that we have a y-intercept of 7. So when we think of the formula y equals mx plus b, our b value right away, I'm going to see here is 7. And then to get our slope, I'm going to pick another point here, let's say the point 40. And our slope is the rise over the run. And notice we have to go down 7, and then we're going over 4. So that would be a slope of negative 7 over 4. We could also just say this is the point 0.07 and this is the point 40 and find the slope between them using the formula, but counting rise over run is a nice option. So then if this was write the equation of the line, it would be negative 7/4 x and then plus 7. But what I notice here is this is an inequality. So it's going to be a situation here where technically what we have is y is less than negative 7/4 x plus 7, because notice that they're shading under, and this line is dotted here, so it's not going to be a less than equal to, it's just going to be a less than. So considering that, we could just eliminate choices F and choices H here because they have the equal to attached. But now we're between choice G and choice J, but notice these are in standard form and we're in mx plus b form. So to match what the answer choice has, I'm going to go ahead and multiply both sides of this inequality by positive 4, because that's going to get this denominator to cancel. So we'll have 4y is less than, and then 4 times negative 7 over 4 is negative 7. We have x, and then we're going to have plus 28. So then the last bit of algebra to do would just be to add 7x to both sides like this. So now our final answer here, once everything's simplified, we're going to have 7x plus 4y is less than 28. And this is going to match up with choice J. All right, question 31 is which situation best shows causation? And I feel like this is really a question of common sense. So here we have the length of a rectangle affects the width of a rectangle. Well, that one's not true. And the reason being is, let's say I have a rectangle that has this width, and then the width is exactly the same in the next rectangle. So notice here, here's the length going across the top and bottom. But now the length is obviously way longer, but notice the width remains intact here. So the length of a rectangle really has no effect on the width. So A is out. The amount of time you use your cell phone affects the charge of its battery. Yes, that is definitely our answer here. The more you use your phone, the battery runs out. So that one makes sense. Now we have the number of ice cream bars sold affects the number of milkshakes sold. No, that one's kind of a weak answer because, it depends on the group you're getting, how many people actually prefer milkshakes over ice cream bars, but that's not going to affect the other. And then the number of soccer balls a team owns affects the number of games the team wins during the soccer season. That one is just really silly. I don't play soccer at all, but I imagine that if I owned 5,000 soccer balls, I wouldn't even come close to the skill of Ronaldo or someone else that's a famous soccer player. So D is out, definitely choice B. So question 32, we could reason our way to the answer here. We want to know which expression is equivalent to this. And if we think about the first and last term, that's going to allow us to eliminate stuff right away. So what I'm imagining is for these, like let's say I take choice J. this would be 8w minus 3 times 8w minus 3. And notice if I do 8w times 8w, I square the first term, I'm going to get 8 times 8 is 64. W times w is w squared. So the 64 is not going to match the coefficient of 16. So this choice is out. And I could also eliminate h for the same reason, that 8w times 8w is not going to give us 16w squared. So now it's between the other two, but then I'm already seeing that g is out. And the reason being, like, yes, 3 times 3 is 9, and negative 3 times negative 3 is 9. However, this minus sign here tells us that the middle term should be a minus, not a plus. So that's why f is looking good. And if I really wanted to be safe here, what I could do is I could expand this 4w plus 3 times 4w plus 3. And if we do the first terms here, that's going to be 16w squared. And then we have 4w times 3 is 12w plus 3 times 4w is also, and I wrote plus too many times, is another 12w. And then 3 times 3 is 9. And then notice when we combine 12w plus 12w, we get the 24w. So this is definitely our answer. So question 33, which graph best represents a function with a domain of all real numbers less than or equal to 6? So looking at choice A, notice this graph goes all the way to the left, but then it stops here at x equals 6. So the domain here would be x is less than or equal to 6. And that's right away our answer. Now, we'll show why the other answer choices are no good. This graph, notice that it begins at x equals negative 4. So the domain of this choice would actually be x is greater than or equal to negative 4 because it starts at negative 4 and it keeps going to the right without stopping. So this one is not our answer. And then choice C, this one, the domain, is going to be x is greater than or equal to 6 because notice it begins at x equals 6. And once it starts here, it keeps going to the right and it never stops. And then choice D is no good because choice D would be a domain of x is less than or equal to, notice that it stops here at x equals 3, but it goes all the way to the left. So it'd be all x values less than or equal to 3. So that's why these two choices here are out, and A is definitely our answer. So question 34, we have a quadratic function h used to model the height of a rocket from the ground t seconds after it was launched. Here's the graph. What is the maximum value of the graph of the function? And this is something we just have to record. The maximum value is the highest point. And notice that's happening over here. And it's happening, it looks like, at about 3.75, right between 3.5 and 4. And I know that also is definitely our t value of our vertex. So we're at 3.75, comma, our y value is 225. And I know that because the roots occur at t equals 0 and t equals 7.5. And if you take the average of the roots, dividing them by 2, notice that gives us 3.75, which gives us that t value that puts us right at the top, the high point of this parabola here. So what is the maximum value of the function? We could just say 225. This is our solution. Question 35, which expression is equivalent to this? And what I would do is I would start by multiplying the numbers. We have 15 times 3 is 45. And then the law of exponents we're going to use when we do a to the b times a to the c, that's a to the b plus c. So we're going to use that throughout. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to do a to the 0 times a to the 16. And that would be a to the 0 plus 16 is 16. And then we'll move on next to the b term here. We have b to the second times b to the negative 29. And if we do 2 plus negative 29, 2 plus negative 29 would give us negative 27 as our exponent of b. And now I'll switch back to purple here. We have c to the 34 times c to the 0. When you add 34 and 0, you're going to get 34. But then you look at the answer choices and you're like, oh no, my answer is not there. And that's because of another rule. When you have a to some negative b power, you could call this 1 over a to the positive b. And one thing that I just kind of look for here is that anytime I have a fraction, let's say I had a fraction like this, like a to the negative 2, b to the negative 3, c to the negative 4, and d to the negative 5, I could send terms through the fraction bar and it changes the exponent from negative to positive. So I could send b to the minus 3 down and it'll become b to the positive 3. C to the minus 4 could go up as c to the 4, and d to the minus 5 could go up as d to the 5 like this. So that allows me to close this out pretty quickly. And we could just say this is 45, a to the 16, b I'm actually going to send down to this denominator as b to the 27. and then we have c to the 34. So now just scan the answer choices here, and this matches choice D. So question 36, we have a contractor's total earnings from a job, including the fixed amount, plus the amount based on the number of hours worked. So here it is here. And we want to know, what is the rate of change of the contractor's total earnings in dollars with respect to the number of hours worked? So rate of change is really just a fancy word in algebra for slope. All right, the slope of a line does not change. And we also call the slope the rate of change of the line. So when you're finding the slope of a line, the slope stays the same. So you could pick any 2 points that you want. So let's say we pick these two. We're going to find the slope between 0, 20. And our second point is going to be 5, 63.75. So now to work this out, our slope or our rate of change here is going to be 63.75 minus 20 divided by 5 minus 0. And this is going to give us on top, we'll have 43.75 divided by 5. And then this here, I could just use approximation and say this is looking like choice F. I could type this in the calculator, or if we want to practice our old math, we could divide decimals here. 5 goes into 40 8 times with a remainder of 3. 5 goes into 37 7 times with a remainder of 2. And then 5 goes into 25 5 times. So 875 per hour is looking good. So question 37, you could do this algebraically, or if you don't know how to do the algebra, you could always just start plugging in x values and see which one gives you something true. Like, let's say here, I say, all right, I think x equals 3 is part of my answer, choice B. And then you get 2 times 3 squared plus 15 is equal to negative 11 times 3. So this gives us 9 times 2 is 18 plus 15 equals negative 33, and 33 equals negative 33 is not true. So B is out, okay? So we could do this by brute force until we get to the answer, or we could do this algebraically by we add the 11x to the other side, and now we get to this step here where we have 2x squared plus 11x plus 15 is equal to 0, and we're going to use the AC method where we have A is equal to 2, B is equal to 11, C is equal to 15. And we want two numbers that have a product of 2 times 15, which is 30, and a sum of 11. And the two numbers that multiply to 30 and add up to 11 are going to be 6 and 5. So now you take 11x and you break it up as 6x plus 5x. You tack on the plus 15, and this is equal to 0. So now factor by grouping. We have 2x. We take out a 2x, we're left with x plus 3. Plus, take out a common 5, you're left with x plus 3. And just note, with factoring by grouping, you know you're on the right track if the terms left match. If they don't match, that means you messed up somewhere before. So now, take out that x plus 3, and you've got 2x plus 5 equals 0. And now set each factor equal to 0. We got x plus 3 equals 0. We got 2x plus 5 equals 0. This will give us x equals negative 3. And x equals negative 3 only shows up in one answer choice. So this has to be the answer. But if we want to solve this one too, subtract 5, 2x equals negative 5, divide by 2. And this gives you x equals negative 5 over 2 is negative 2.5, which matches the other x value. Definitely choice D. Question 38, we have a table of values for some exponential function. Which function best represents this relationship? So here, notice that the y values are growing. So right away, that tells me g is out and j is out, because when our base here, see how our base is 2/3? 2/3 is between 0 and 1. So if you keep multiplying something by 2/3 repeatedly, it's going to make the values of y smaller, not bigger. This would be kind of like an exponential decay type graph, whereas f and h are definitely exponential growth because the base 3 over 2 is greater than 1 for both of these. So that's why f and h are the only possible answers here. So now to determine which one of these it is, what we could say from the graph here is this tells us that f of 2 is equal to 36. So we could take the remaining answer choices and plug in x equals 2 and see which one gives us 36. So we have f of 2, let's say for choice f, we would have f of 2 is equal to 16 times 3/2 squared like this. And if we do 3 over 2 times 3 over 2, that's going to give us 9 over 4. And then 16 over 4 is 4. 4 times 9 is 36. So check it out, it matches. And I know right away that h is not going to match because if all we change is the 36 in front from a 16, that's going to make the answer bigger. But we could even see here, if we were to plug in to choice H here, we have f of 2 is equal to 36 times 3/2 squared. And this would give us 36 times 9 over 4. And then 36 over 4 is 9, and 9 times 9 is 81. So that'd be too much. So this one is out. F is looking good. So question 39, which statement best represents the equation of the line and its relationship to the x-axis? So looking at this here, the relationship of this line to the x-axis is that it's parallel to the x-axis because they're never going to cross. So we could definitely eliminate perpendicular choices B and D. Now, the most common mistake here is that students just look at this and say, oh, it's going horizontal just like the x-axis, and it's going through 2.5. So they go ahead and they choose x equals 2.5 here. But this is a very dangerous bear trap. Okay, this is not the answer. It's actually going to be this one, because what you want to think about here is every point on that line, like this is the point 1, 2.5. This is 4, 2.5, and I'll do one more. Let's say over here is -3, 2.5. You want to ask yourself, what do all of the points on this line have in common, and their y values are equal to 2.5. So that's why it would be y equals 2.5 and not x. But if you really wanted to play it safe, just go to y equals here, clear this out, and type in y equals 2.5 and press graph. And I'll press zoom 6 just to make sure things are back to normal. And notice there's our horizontal line. Question 40, you should know the difference of two squares formula. Anytime you have the difference of two squares, it factors to a plus b times a minus b. So here, this is almost as if we have an a value of 3n and a b value of 5. Because you could notice here, if I do a squared, 3n times 3n gives me 9n squared, and then b squared would give me 5 times 5 is 25. So then here, this is going to factor to a plus b times a minus b. So I'd have a is 3n plus b is 5 times a is 3n minus b is 5. Okay, just know when you're doing this, you do the square root of the first term plus or minus the square root of the second term. So now we scan the answer choices. Choice G is our answer. Question 41, we have a linear function that has an x-intercept of -1 and a y-intercept of 5. Which graph best represents this line? So I'm looking here at an x-intercept of -1. Notice choice A is not hitting the x-axis here as we wanted to, so this one is out. Choice B is not hitting the x-axis here, so this one is also out. Choice C is definitely hitting the x-axis at -1, and let's see, does it hit the y-axis at 5? It does not. It misses this point, so C is out. So this has to be the answer, but let's see here. At x equals -1, we have our x-intercept, and at y equals 5, we have our y-intercept, so this one definitely fits the description. So question 42, y is directly proportional to x. And what that means, directly proportional, is when you have something that as x increases, so as x increases, y increases. It's a line in the form y equals k times x, where k is a constant. If we had an inverse proportion, just know that inversely proportional is when your graph looks something like this. And your equation would be x times y is equal to a constant, or you could say y equals k over x. And for inverse proportion, as x increases, y gets smaller. But since we were told that there's a direct proportion between x and y, we're going with this formula, not this one. So now I just plug in the stuff here. We have when x is 3.5, y is 14, is going to give us 14 equals k times 3.5. And now just divide both sides by 3.5. And that's going to tell us what the value of k is. So k is going to be equal to 14 divided by 3.5 is going to be 4. So then what we could do with this information, now we could write our actual equation, which is y equals k, which is 4, times x. And this is going to help us answer the question, what is the value of y when x is 28? Now we just plug into this, y is equal to 4 times x is equal to 28. And if we just work that out on the side here, we could just do 4 times 8 is 32, carry the 3, 4 times 2 is 8, plus 3 is 11. So y is going to be equal to 112. That's our solution. Question 43, we have a quadratic function that's graphed on the grid, and we want to know what's the domain and range. So looking at this here, because this is a quadratic graph, notice the arrows going in either direction tells us that this graph goes all the way to the left and all the way to the right. This thing is just going to keep climbing as we go to the right, and it's going to keep climbing as we go all the way to the left. So the domain here is actually all real numbers. And this is the symbol for all real numbers. So domain is all real numbers, basically eliminates every answer choice except option B here. But let's verify, why is the range y greater than or equal to 5? So when you're trying to identify range, you want to put either a floor or a ceiling or both on your graph. So notice here that we could put a floor. Our floor is going to be at y equals 5. So our range here is going to start at y equals 5. But notice that this graph keeps going all the way up to infinity. So our range is going from 5 to infinity, but if we write it out the way they have it in the answer choices, our y values are all greater than or equal to 5. So that's why this is definitely choice B. Question 44, another linear function. So we're going to write the equation of the line, and we're going to choose these 2 points here. So our slope, our m value, is going to be the difference of the y value, so 78 minus 0, over 5 minus 2, the difference of the x value. So this is going to be 78 divided by 3. And when we divide these two, 3 goes into 7 twice with the remainder of 1. And then 3 goes into 18 6 times. So our slope is 26. So right away, that eliminates every answer choice except the first one. Because I could see here, when I distribute the negative 26, we would have a slope of negative 52. This would give us a slope of 13. This would give us another slope of negative 52. So automatically this. But if I really had to be safe here, let's take the point 20. And if I want to write the equation of the line, this is x1, y1, let's say. We have this formula, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And if we plug in, we have y minus 0 equals the slope is 26 times x minus 2. And then this just becomes y equals 26 times x minus 2. So definitely this choice here. So factoring and being able to add quickly in your head. So for here, we want to factor this expression. We need two numbers that have a sum of 10 and a product of 24. So you think about all the factors of 24, like 1 times 24, 2 times 12, we have 3 times 8, we have 4 times 6, and then we think which of these add up to 10, it's going to be these two. So this breaks down to x plus 4 times x plus 6. So that's how we factor this quickly, and this is going to match choice D. Question 46, which graph best represents the solution set of this linear inequality? Now notice all of the lines are almost the same, except some are solid and dotted. But notice they have the same y-intercept of negative 4. And they have the same x-intercept of positive 5-ish, it looks like. Almost 5, a little bit more than 5. So these are all the same graph. So the only thing that distinguishes them is how they're either shaded or if the line is solid or dotted. Now the fact that it's less than or equal to tells us this is going to be a solid line. So that means this choice is out and this choice is out. Less than or equal to tells you to shade under. So that's why this one, 46, is just going to be choice F because it's shading under. Question 47, we have a scatter plot about pastries, and here's the table of values. Which function best models the data? This is all calculator work. So go over to stats, go to edit, and then we're going to write our x and y values in the table. So once we got everything inputted here, remember all the answer choices had an x squared attached. So when I go to calculate, I'm actually going to do a quadratic regression because I want to come up with a quadratic formula that best captures this data. So that's going to be option 5. And we go over, we just keep pressing enter and we calculate. And this is the data we're going to need. So borrowing this data here, you see how A is going to be negative 60. That's our coefficient of x squared. And then our B value coefficient of x is 348.1. And then our constant at the end is going to be negative 334.2. So this is definitely matching choice B. Question 48, if we want to solve this a different way, what we could do is we could actually distribute the answer choices to see which one matches the question. And if we distribute choice F, notice that this gives us 7 times 5m squared is 35m squared. 7 times minus 9 is minus 63. So right away, I could see this one's equivalent. If I were to distribute the others, this would give me negative 35m squared and minus 63. So this one's no good. But let's say, I could eliminate all the other choices that way, or we could take the question itself and factor it directly. We could take out a common factor of 7, and if we divide each thing by 7, we'll have 5m squared minus 9 like this. So question 49, which inequality best represents the domain of the part of the graph shown here? And notice it's an open circle here, at -2. So the graph starts at -2. This is where it starts, and then it goes towards the right here. So the only x values that are valid here are the x values that are strictly greater than 2. If this had been colored in and it was solid, it would be greater than or equal to, but it's just going to be greater than -2 here. So that's why this is choice C. So question 50, what is the value of y in the solution to this system of equations? So for this one here, we could solve the system a few different ways, but substitution seems to be our best bet since this is already solved for x. So we'd have 6y plus, and then instead of x, notice the x over here, we could replace with this definition of x. X is equal to -2y plus 9, and then this is what we're going to set equal to -59. So we're just taking this x equation and plugging it into the line above. And now from here, we just simplify. 6y plus -2y is going to give us 4y. And just know when your parentheses is to the first power, notice there's an invisible 1 here. You could just get rid of that parentheses. So we have 6y plus -2y is 4y, and then we just tack on the plus 9 like this. And this is equal to -59. So from here, I would subtract 9 on both sides like this. 9 minus 9 cancels. We have 4y equals, when we subtract those two, -59 minus 9 is going to give us -68. And now divide both sides by 4. And then y is going to be negative. So before I do any simplification here, I know these choices are out. And from this step here, I'm going to do 4 goes into 6. So you have a negative, 4 goes into 6 once with the remainder of 2. And then 4 goes into 28 7 times. So -17 is our y value solution. So question 51 is applications of linear functions. And we have a graph that models the linear relationship between the number of monthly payments made on a loan and the remaining balance in dollars left to pay the loan. So which statement best describes the x-intercept on this graph? All right, so if you are in high school, chances are like you don't have a ton of loans that you have to pay back. Sorry if you do. But this is something that would definitely hit home closer for like, older people, because you got to pay back stuff like student loans, you got to pay off your house. But this is the amount of money you owe initially here. So the remaining balance, the y-intercept would represent how much money we owe from the start. And then as time goes on, we're making our monthly payments and the amount we owe is going down because we're paying off the loan. So the x-intercept represents the amount of time it takes for us to repay the loan. But in this case, the x-intercept is the number of monthly payments. So this tells us that it's going to take 60 monthly payments to pay off this loan. And just know 60 months, if we wanted to bring this to real life, is the same thing as 5 years because there's 12 months in a year. So this is going to be a 5-year loan. So the x-intercept here is 60. So right away, these two choices are out because they're talking about the y-intercept. And this represents the number of monthly payments needed to repay the loan. Choice A is no good because it represents the initial balance in dollars of the loan. That would be the y-intercept. So this one is out, but it would be true if it was the y-intercept is 27,000 and this represents the initial balance, then A would be good, but we're talking about the x-intercept. So definitely choice C. So question 52, we have the graph of f of x equals x squared is translated 4.5 units to the left to create the graph of the function g. So g of x, if you know your transformation rules, if you want to go 4.5 to the left, you're going to take the x and you're going to replace it with x plus 4.5. Okay, so this will send it to the left. This one throws people off because they're like, wait, plus means right, but it's kind of like a reverse rule here. Going to the left, we would do this. So we're looking for this answer choice, the x plus 4.5 squared, and this is going to be g. Just know that if you did x minus 4.5 squared, replacing it, this would send us to the right here. So that's why f is no good. This is a very dangerous answer choice. This one would be us going down 4.5 units. All right, let me make that w a little bit neater. So if we were going down 4.5 units, we attach the minus 4.5 after the x squared. And that's why this one's out. And this one would send us up 4.5 units. So definitely this answer choice. But if you really want to be safe, what you could do is you could type in x squared, the original function. They usually call that the parent function. And then you type in all the answer choices till you get your match. But I promise you that x plus 4.5 in parentheses squared will send the original graph to the left 4.5 units. So notice here's the original graph in blue, and then it moves the graph over to the left 4.5 units. So definitely that second answer choice. So question 53, which graph best represents y equals 5 times 1/3 to the x power? So this is an exponential function, but notice the base is between 0 and 1. So this is going to be an exponential function that decreases like this. So right away, I know I could eliminate this choice A and choice B is gone. So it's either going to be C or D. Then the next thing that allows me to do this without a calculator is I look for the y-intercept. So the y-intercept occurs when x is equal to 0. And if we plug in x equals 0, we have y equals 5 times 1/3 to the 0 power. 1/3 to the 0 is 1. So our y-intercept is going to be at the point 0, 5. And notice that choice C is going over here to 0, 1. So that's no good. But choice D, if we look at this one, the y-intercept is clearly at 0, 5. But if we want to be really safe, once again, if you're allowed a calculator, there's no shame in using it here. If we type in 5 times and we have 1/3 in parentheses, which I'll write like this, and then to the power x, and we press graph, notice that our graph matches what we have here. The y-intercept is clearly at the point 0, 5. So our answer choice is definitely correct. All right, so we made it to the last question here. What is the solution to this equation? We're going to start by distributing here. We could use the calculator to solve everything, but why not practice our algebra? -4 times 2m is -8m, and then -4 times -7 is +28 equals, and then on this side, we distribute a 3 instead, and let's change colors here. So we have 3 times 52, and in my head, I'm doing 3 times 50 is 150, 3 times 2 is 6, and 150 plus 6 is 156. All right, or just use a calculator. 3 times -4m is going to give us -12m. So my goal here is to move the m terms to the left and the constants to the right. So I would start by going plus 12m on both sides. And now we simplify here, and we're going to have 12m minus 8m is 4m. We get our plus 28, and this is equal to 156. So now we could subtract 28 on both sides. And after we subtract, we have 4m equals, and this, if we borrow or use a calculator here, we're going to have an 8. 4 minus 2 is 2, and then we tack on the 1. So now the last thing to do is just divide both sides by 4. So this tells us here that m is equal to 12 divided by 4 is 3, and 8 divided by 4 is 2. So m equals 32 is our solution, choice F.